The last beacon Admiral Lyrian Stardust stood before the massive viewing screen of the Eternal Harmony, watching her civilization burn. The Celestial Alliance had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, bringing peace and prosperity to over 200 worlds. Now, barely 30 systems remained, and even those were falling to the Void Swarm. The enemy ships looked like living nightmares, black masses that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved without formation, without apparent strategy, yet somehow they had destroyed every fleet sent against them. The Void Swarm didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them, leaving behind empty husks drifting in space. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the Serenity fleet," reported Captain Thane, his crystalline skin pale with fear. "That's our last major defensive force." Lyrian's elegant features remained calm, but inside she felt the weight of failure. The Celestial Alliance had perfected warfare over millennia. Their ships moved in perfect harmony, their weapons struck with divine precision, and their tactics were based on thousands of years of peaceful resolution. Yet none of it mattered against an enemy that didn't follow the rules of civilized combat. "How long until they reach the core worlds?" she asked. 3 days, maybe 4, if the Sanctuary fleet holds the line." Lyrian walked to the communication console. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements graceful and precise. Everything about the Celestial Alliance was beautiful, orderly, and utterly failing against the chaos of the Void Swarm. "Bring me the Deep Space Survey files," she ordered. "Focus on the Outer Rim territories." Captain Thane looked confused. "Admiral, the Outer Rim is populated only by primitive species. Nothing there could help us." "Perhaps," Lyrian said, accessing the files, "but we've exhausted every conventional option." She scrolled through dozens of reports on undeveloped worlds until one caught her attention. A small blue planet called Earth, inhabited by a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. The survey team's report was disturbing. The humans had spent most of their recorded history at war with each other. Their approach to combat was chaotic, unpredictable, and focused on complete destruction rather than honorable victory. They used tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare: deception, surprise attacks, and psychological manipulation. Most shocking of all, they seemed to have no concept of surrender. When facing impossible odds, they became more dangerous, not less. The survey team had documented conflicts where vastly outnumbered human forces achieved victory through sheer determination and brutal creativity. "Captain," Lyrian said quietly, "prepare a long-range transmission to Earth." "Admiral, they're barely more advanced than animals. What could they possibly do against the Void Swarm?" Lyrian looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. "Sometimes, Captain, the only way to fight monsters is to find bigger monsters." A message took 5 days to reach Earth's solar system. It was simple and desperate. The Celestial Alliance was dying, and they needed help. In return, they offered knowledge, technology, an alliance with galactic civilization. Captain Elena Voss was conducting routine patrol exercises in the outer system when the transmission arrived. The UE's Retribution, her flagship, was one of only 75 interstellar vessels in the human fleet. They were crude compared to the alien technology described in the message, but they were built for one purpose: war. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from outside the system," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim. "It's definitely not from Earth." Voss frowned. First contact protocols were clear, but no one had expected aliens to contact them directly. "Put it through to the analysis team. Get Dr. Webb up here immediately." Dr. Marcus Webb arrived within minutes, his scientific team following behind. He was young but brilliant, with expertise in theoretical xenobiology that made him invaluable for this moment. As the translated message played, His eyes widened with excitement and terror. "My God," he whispered, "they're asking for help." "Help? Against what?" Voss asked. Webb replayed the message, pointing to the tactical data. "Something called the Void Swarm. From what I can understand, they're facing complete extinction. They want us to help them fight." Voss studied the star charts, showing the location of the Celestial Alliance. It was thousands of light years away, but their new quantum drives could make the journey in a few weeks. The question was whether humanity should get involved in an alien war. "Get me Admiral Chun on Earth," Voss ordered. "This decision is above my authority." The conversation with Earth Command was heated. Some argued that humanity wasn't ready for galactic warfare, that they should focus on defending their own system. Others saw an opportunity to gain alien allies and technology. "Captain," Admiral Chun said finally, "this is ultimately your call. You're out there, and you understand the situation better than we do. But remember, if you take our fleet to fight this war, you might be leading humanity into a trap." Voss looked around her bridge at her crew. They were good people, trained for war but hoping for peace. Now they faced a choice that could determine humanity's future among the stars. "Prepare the fleet for long-range jump," she ordered. "We're going to help them." The human fleet emerged from quantum space at the edge of Celestial Alliance territory. 2 weeks later, Admiral Lyrian watched from her command center as the strange vessels approached. They were unlike anything in the galactic database, angular, aggressive, and covered in weapon systems that seemed designed for maximum destruction. "They're not beautiful," Captain Thane observed. "No," Lyrian agreed, studying the tactical readouts. "But they're functional." The lead ship was the U.E.'s Retribution, and its captain requested permission to dock. Within hours, the human diplomatic team was aboard the Eternal Harmony. Captain Voss led the group, accompanied by Dr. Webb and Sergeant Rico Martinez, a Marine, whose scarred face spoke of many battles. Lyrian met them in the main briefing chamber. The humans were smaller than expected, but there was something in their eyes that made her pause. They looked at everything with the intensity of predators, constantly assessing threats and advantages. "Welcome, humans," Lyrian said through the translation device. "I must admit, you're different from what we expected." Sergeant Martinez stepped forward. He was built like a weapon, with muscles developed for combat and reflexes honed by violence. "Different how, Admiral?" "Your species file mentioned that you are ... primitive." Martinez smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "We're primitive enough to win wars, ma'am. That's what matters." Lyrian gestured to the holographic display showing local space. Red zones marked Void Swarm territory, covering most of the map. "This is what we face. The Void Swarm has consumed 173 worlds in 5 years. They convert all organic matter into more of themselves, creating an endless cycle of consumption and growth." Dr. Webb studied the tactical data flowing across his tablet. "Your weapons appear very advanced. Energy shields, quantum torpedoes, faster-than-light communication. Why haven't these advantages helped?" "Because the Void Swarm doesn't fight like civilized beings," Captain Thane replied. "They have no honor, no rules. They attack in massive formations, overwhelming our defenses through sheer numbers." Captain Voss watched combat footage from recent battles. The Celestial Alliance fought like a symphony orchestra, their ships moving in perfect coordination. Every shot was precisely calculated. Every maneuver followed established tactical doctrine. It was beautiful and completely ineffective. Asterisk. The Void Swarm, by contrast, attacked like a plague. Their bioships swarmed around alliance formations, taking massive casualties but never breaking off. They seemed to learn from each encounter, adapting their tactics to counter whatever the alliance tried. "Your combat doctrine is very formal," Sergeant Martinez observed, Lots of rules and procedures. Of course, Lyrian replied, sounding confused. Warfare must be conducted with honor and precision. Anything else would be barbaric. Martinez and Voss exchanged glances. The Marine had fought in dozens of conflicts across human space, most of them brutal affairs where survival mattered more than honor. He was already seeing the problem with the Alliance approach. Admiral, Voss said carefully, would it be possible for us to observe a battle firsthand? That can be arranged. The Void Swarm probes our defenses daily. There will be another attack soon. The attack came 12 hours later. Voss and her team watched from the Eternal Harmony's command center as Void Swarm bioships approached the station. The alien vessels looked like massive sea creatures crossed with mechanical nightmares, their hulls pulsing with dark energy. All ships maintain formation Theta 7, Admiral Lyrian ordered. Prepare for coordinated quantum discharge on my mark. The Alliance fleet moved into perfect position, their ships forming geometric patterns that maximized firepower while minimizing exposure to enemy weapons. It was like watching a ballet, beautiful and precise. The Void Swarm surged toward them in a chaotic mass. When the two forces met, the Alliance unleashed devastating energy beams that tore through the enemy formation. Dozens of bioships exploded in brilliant flashes, but the Void Swarm kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. Fascinating, Dr. Webb murmured, making notes. They're not trying to win through superior tactics. They're accepting massive casualties to achieve their objectives. Sergeant Martinez watched with professional interest. The Alliance is fighting a gentleman's war. The Void Swarm is fighting for survival. Guess which approach works better? The battle lasted 6 hours. The Alliance held their positions and inflicted heavy casualties. But they lost 12 ships, while the Void Swarm seemed to have unlimited replacements. When the attackers finally withdrew, both sides claimed victory. We destroyed over 400 enemy vessels, Lyrian announced to her commanders. Our formation held perfectly. But they accomplished their real objective, Martinez said quietly to Voss. They tested your defenses, learned your response patterns, and bled your fleet a little more. They can afford to lose 400 ships. Can you afford to lose 12? That evening, the human team met privately in their quarters. Voss pulled up tactical displays while Webb analyzed Alliance technology and Martinez studied personnel reports. They're losing this war, Martinez said bluntly. Perfect formations, predictable tactics, rules of engagement that limit their effectiveness. It's like they're more concerned with looking honorable than winning. The technology gap isn't as big as we thought, Webb added. Their individual systems are more advanced, but our ships are built tougher. More importantly, our weapons are designed for one purpose, killing the enemy as efficiently as possible. Voss nodded. The Void Swarm has adapted to formal warfare. They've learned to counter everything the Alliance can throw at them, but they've never faced human tactics. What are you thinking? Webb asked. Martinez smiled grimly. I'm thinking we need to show them how humans fight. No formations, no honor, no rules except winning. The next morning, Voss requested a meeting with Admiral Lyrian. The Alliance leader looked exhausted. Reports from other fronts showed continued losses, and the refugee crisis was overwhelming their remaining worlds. Admiral, Voss began, we'd like permission to engage the next Void Swarm attack. Lyrian's large eyes widened. With your 5 ships? That would be suicide. Maybe, but we'd like to try our own methods. Your methods? But you have no experience with space warfare on this scale. Voss smiled. No, Admiral. We have no experience with civilized space warfare. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, and we've gotten very good at it. The question is, are you desperate enough to let us try? Lyrian looked around the briefing room at her exhausted staff. Outside, alarms were already sounding as sensors detected another Void Swarm probe forming up for attack. "Very well," she said finally. "But I warn you, humans, the Void Swarm shows no mercy to those who oppose them." Martinez stood up, his hand resting on his weapon. "Admiral, mercy is something we save for after the shooting stops, and we're very good at making the shooting stop." As the human team prepared to return to their ships, none of them realized they were about to introduce the galaxy to a form of warfare that would change everything. The Celestial Alliance had called for backup against monsters, not knowing they had summoned something far more dangerous. The real beasts were about to show up. Asterisk. Unleashing hell, the Void Swarm attack came. At dawn, ship time. Admiral Lyrian watched from her command center as the bioships formed their usual chaotic approach pattern, preparing to test the station's defenses once again. But this time, something was different. The human ships had moved away from the yaw. Main Alliance fleet, positioning themselves in seemingly random locations throughout the defensive perimeter. "What are they doing?" Captain Thane asked, studying the tactical display. "They're not in formation. They're completely scattered." "Maybe they don't understand proper fleet tactics," another officer suggested. Lyrian said nothing, but she was beginning to suspect that the humans understood tactics very well. They just used different ones. Aboard the UE's Retribution, Captain Voss watched the Void Swarm approach. The bioships moved like a living tide of darkness, their organic hulls pulsing with malevolent energy. There had to be at least 800. Of them, far more than any Alliance fleet had ever faced successfully. "All ships, this is Retribution," she broadcast to the human fleet. "Remember, we're not here to look pretty. We're here to kill as many of these things as possible. Weapons. Free." The first human ship to engage was the UE's Phantom, commanded by Captain Lisa Park. Her vessel had been designed for stealth operations, built to slip past enemy defenses and strike where least expected. As the Void Swarm closed on the main Alliance fleet, the Phantom attacked from behind. Park didn't target the massive bioships that the Alliance always aimed for. Instead, she went after the smaller support vessels that seemed to coordinate the swarm's movements. Her weapons tore through ship after ship, disrupting the careful synchronization that made the Void Swarm so effective. "What is she doing?" Lyrian demanded. "Those smaller ships aren't the main threat." "She's cutting the puppet strings," Sergeant Martinez explained. He had remained on the Alliance station to observe. "The Void Swarm fights as a connected organism. Break the connections, and they become just individual ships." Captain Torres in the UES Valkyrie attacked from a completely different angle. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet directly, he launched long-range missiles at the Void Swarm staging area behind the main attack. The aliens had never seen weapons that could strike targets they couldn't even detect, turning their own rear. Guard into chaos. But it was Dr. Webb who provided the real shock. Working with a team of human technicians, he had been studying captured Void Swarm biomatter for days. Now he activated a device that broadcast signals mimicking Void Swarm communication. Patterns, but with one crucial difference. Instead of coordinating the attack, it sent contradictory orders. Half the swarm turned left, half turned right, and they crashed into each other in a tangle of organic metal and confused bioships. "Impossible," whispered Captain Thane. "You can't hack a biological organism. You can if you understand that biology is just another form of technology." Webb replied through the communication link. "We've been dealing with biological weapons for centuries. This is just a bigger version." The Void Swarm tried to adapt, but the humans kept changing tactics. When the aliens compensated for the communication jamming, Captain Park hit them with a new surprise: mines that looked like destroyed ship debris. When they learned to avoid the fake wreckage, Captain Torres attacked their supply lines with weapons that turned their own bioships into bombs. Most shocking of all was what happened when a group of Void Swarm warriors managed to board the U.S. Wolverine. The Alliance expected the humans to fall back to defensive positions and try to contain the borders, as civilized species always did. Instead, they watched in horror as the human crew went on the attack. Sergeant Danny Walsh led his Marines through the ship's corridors. He and his team didn't fight like soldiers defending their home. They fought like predators hunting prey. They used the ship's own systems against the borders, turning life support into a weapon and using gravity generators to disorient their enemies. When conventional weapons ran out, the humans improvised. They used maintenance tools as clubs, turned food preparation areas into weapon factories, and fought with a creativity that stunned the aliens watching through security cameras. Asterisk. They're not defending, Captain Thane observed with shock. They're hunting. The Void Swarm warriors were tough, bred for combat, and enhanced with bioweapons that could tear through metal. But they had never faced humans in close combat. Within 2 hours, the boarding party was completely eliminated, and the humans were already stripping their bodies for useful materials. You study your enemies by dissecting them? Lyrian asked when she saw the reports. How else would you learn how they work? Walsh replied, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. These bioweapons they use are pretty interesting. We might be able to turn them against the swarm. The battle that the Alliance expected to last 8 hours was over in 4. The Void Swarm had lost nearly 3/4 of their attack force, and the survivors retreated in complete disarray. More importantly, they retreated without gathering their usual intelligence about enemy defenses. How did you do that? Lyrian asked during the post-battle briefing. Captain Voss looked tired but satisfied. We fought to win, not to look good doing it. The Void Swarm has been studying your tactics for years. They know exactly how you'll respond to any given situation. But they've never seen human tactics before. Your methods are very... Lyrian searched for a diplomatic word, unconventional. They're effective, Martinez said bluntly. Look, Admiral, we appreciate that you have rules about how warfare should be conducted. Honor, formations, clean kills, all that stuff. But the Void Swarm doesn't follow your rules. They're trying to exterminate your species. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Dr. Webb looked up from his analysis reports. The Void Swarm's communication system is more vulnerable than we thought. If we can capture more of their biotechnology, we might be able to turn their own coordination against them. Turn it against them how? Fane asked. By feeding them false information, Webb explained. Make them think their own ships are enemies. Turn their swarm mentality into chaos. Lyrian was quiet for a long moment. What the humans were suggesting went against everything her people believed about honorable warfare. But her people were dying, and traditional methods had failed. What would you need? She asked finally. Access to your manufacturing facilities. Voss replied, permission to modify your weapon systems. Some of the things we want to try will probably violate your safety protocols. Why? Martinez smiled grimly. Because safe weapons don't kill enemies efficiently enough. News of the human victory spread through the Void Swarm's collective consciousness faster than light. For the first time in their species' history, they had encountered tactics they couldn't predict or counter. These strange beings from the edge of the galaxy fought without honor, without mercy, and without the predictable patterns that the swarm had learned to exploit. The collective consciousness processed this new information and came to a disturbing conclusion. The humans weren't just another species to be consumed. They were a threat that had to be eliminated before they could spread their chaotic influence to other parts of the galaxy. Void Swarm behavior began to change across all fronts. Their attacks became more frequent, more desperate, and far more brutal than before. They started targeting civilian populations, destroying everything they couldn't immediately consume. They're not following their usual patterns anymore, Admiral Lyrian told Captain Voss during their daily briefing. The Void Swarm is attacking civilian targets, destroying infrastructure. It's as if they're trying to end this war quickly before we can use more human tactics. Voss nodded grimly. They're scared. We've introduced uncertainty into their calculations, and they don't like it. Cornered animals are always the most dangerous. But we're not animals, Lyrian protested. No, Voss agreed. We're something worse. The first sign of how much worse came when new orders arrived from Earth Command. The message was brief but clear. Total war protocol authorized. Rules of engagement suspended. Win at any cost. General Sarah Kane arrived 3 days later aboard the UES Apocalypse, leading a fleet of 200 warships. She was a small woman with gray hair and cold eyes that had seen too many battles. Her reputation preceded her. She was the architect of the Titan War victory, the woman who had broken the Mars Rebellion through sheer ruthless efficiency. Captain Voss, she said during the fleet briefing, you've done excellent work here, but now we finish this properly. Commander. Alex Chun accompanied her, a tactical specialist whose innovations had revolutionized human warfare. He studied the Void Swarm data with professional interest, already formulating strategies that would have horrified the Alliance leadership. The enemy thinks in terms of consumption and expansion, Chun explained to the assembled human officers. They view this conflict as a feeding process. We're going to teach them the difference between feeding and extermination. The new human weapons systems horrified even their own crews. Chun had developed biological agents that turned the Void Swarm's reproduction process against them. Instead of creating new warriors, infected bioships began producing toxic compounds that killed nearby vessels. That's chemical warfare, protested Dr. Webb. It violates every treaty we've ever signed. We never signed treaties with the Void Swarm, Chun replied coldly. And they're not exactly fighting clean either. They turn entire planets into breeding grounds. I'm just leveling the playing field. Captain Park aboard the Phantom had developed her own methods. Her stealth ship could now infiltrate Void Swarm-controlled space and plant devices that caused entire sectors to become uninhabitable. She didn't just attack military targets anymore. She went after the infrastructure that kept Void Swarm worlds functioning. You're committing genocide, accused an Alliance observer who had been assigned to her ship. Good, Park replied without emotion. That's the point. You can't coexist with a species that wants to consume all organic life. One of us has to go extinct. I prefer it to be them. The humans began using tactics that shocked their allies as much as their enemies. They redirected stellar radiation to sterilize entire Void Swarm breeding worlds. They created weapons that caused maximum suffering instead of clean deaths, because screaming bioships disrupted swarm coordination better than silent ones. Most disturbing of all, they began to think like the Void Swarm themselves. General Kane had spent weeks studying collective consciousness behavior patterns. She could now predict swarm movements with frightening accuracy because she had learned to embrace the same ruthless logic that drove the enemy. The key is not to fight them, she explained to a mixed group of human and Alliance officers. The key is to become them, but better. They think as one mind controlling millions of bodies. We need to think as millions of minds working toward one goal. Their complete extinction. The Alliance began to realize they had unleashed something they couldn't control. During a recent battle, they watched human Marines board a damaged Void Swarm bioship not to capture it, but to study how its occupants died. The humans examined enemy corpses with scientific detachment, taking notes on the most effective ways to kill them. They're not soldiers anymore, Captain Thane whispered to Admiral Lyrian. They're something else. What are they? Lyrian asked, asterisk. Apex predators, Lieutenant Commander Hayes replied, having overheard the conversation. Humans didn't evolve to be civilized, Admiral. We evolved to hunt. Everything else is just decoration. The final battle came sooner than expected. The Void. Swarm, recognizing the existential threat that humanity represented, gathered every bioship in their collective for one massive assault on the core worlds. It was the largest fleet ever assembled. Over 10,000 vessels that blotted out the stars themselves. The combined human alliance. Force that met them was smaller, but infinitely more dangerous. The alliance ships had been modified with human weapons and tactics, their crews trained in the art of total warfare. The humans had studied their enemy for months, learning to exploit every weakness in the collective consciousness. When the battle began, it wasn't warfare, it was extermination. The humans didn't just defeat the Void Swarm. They systematically dismantled their ability to exist as a species. They turned the swarm's own biology against them, corrupted their communication networks, and used their collective consciousness to spread panic and confusion through their ranks. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Void Swarm was extinct, not defeated, not scattered extinct. The humans had ensured that not a single bioship escaped to rebuild elsewhere. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors among the debris, Admiral Lyrian stood on the bridge of the Eternal Harmony and wondered what her people had become allies with. The humans had saved them, but at a cost that was only now becoming clear. Admiral, Captain Voss said, approaching her, the Void Swarm is gone. Your people are safe. Yes, Lyrian replied quietly. But what about the rest of the galaxy? What happens when word spreads about human capabilities? Voss considered this carefully. That's up to you, Admiral. We didn't ask to get involved in this war. We came because you asked for help. Now we're asking for the same consideration. Which is, don't make us your enemy, Voss said simply. We're very good at solving problems, but we're even better at being problems. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, leaving behind alliance worlds that were safe but forever changed, both species understood that the galaxy would never be the same. The Celestial Alliance had called for backup against monsters and received something far more terrifying than their enemies. They had received humanity at war. And humanity at war was something the universe had never seen before and hoped never to see again. Asterisk